Thanks, Maynard, for talking to us today. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. So let's talk about the massive fight between the MPs in CCC. This happened about 2-3 weeks ago.
Yeah, it's about 2-3 weeks ago. So how this starts is that a bunch of MPs, they attend some function in Westgate. And Hopo Chingono gets the hang of this. He is an investigative journalist. And he publishes that CCC MPs are going to be bribed with land or stands in Meborain. And those stands, they're part of Emmerson Mnangagwa's attempt to bribe. And Hopo goes on. And on the list of MPs from the opposition is Richard Trangirai. You might remember Morgan Trangirai. Everybody knows Morgan Trangirai. His son, Richard Trangirai, is part of that list. And Hopo really digs in to Richard Trangirai. And he keeps saying to him, are you going to accept the land or not? And, Richard is jumping from pillar to post, doesn't really quite answer the question. He's answering in so many words. And also on that list is Bridget Nandor. And she's another MP. And later on, Bridget Nandor then takes to Facebook to say, hi Hope, I'm being attacked for my name being on the list of people that are said to receive stands, and the people that are giving you this information, they pretend to hate Zanu PF, they pretend to be opposition, but they're also fighting. But more than anything, she takes a dig at Joanna Mambe, who is the MP for the Meborain area. I think it's Harare West, if I'm not mistaken. So she takes a huge dig at Joanna Mambe and somebody called Denford Ngadziwore. Denford Ngadziwore is the brother to Taku Ngadziwore, that famous student activist who was arrested in COVID for quite a while. But Denford himself, he's got some history. There was a time when he submitted fake qualifications and then he was kicked out of university, or some of that sort. But she digs in and says Denford and Joanna, they basically eat with Zanu PF at night, but then they pretend to hate the opposition. And she goes on to allege that, so she kind of insinuates that Joanna is involved with Zanu PF people, something about a boyfriend, or you got arrested. It just gets very messy and very personal. And then that fight just blows up on social media. Voice notes get distributed everywhere. It's basically civil war within the CCC, at that point. And I know that sounds a bit mute because civil war has been happening in the CCC for a while, because there's the whole Chabangu, Chamisa, that was pretty much civil war in the CCC. Then now there is Chabangu fighting Washman Ngube. You could say that's also, like a civil war. But in essence, that's the fight. And Joanna initially doesn't want to respond, but eventually she does. She responds twice. But that was essentially, the fight. Opposition MPs get gifted land in and this is like prime land, right? It's some of it is even on wetlands, but it's prime land. It's this huge stands, and at the time, it's like, hey, look, opposition MPs are getting, they're getting gifts from Emmerson Mnangagwa. So that's basically it. If I answered you correctly, that is.
That's interesting. Who are the characters and how did this happen?
So the protagonists in the story are Bridget Nandor herself, Joanna Mambe, as I said, Denford Ngadziwore, who's not an MP, but becomes a key figure because of some of the allegations that come out of that. And then you've got Richard Trangirai, and obviously Hopo Chingono, because he's the one who first gets a hand of this information. And I think those are the main characters. But you can't excuse Emmerson Mnangagwa, because, by the way, the issue is that the MPs are getting this land as a bribe from Emmerson Mnangagwa so that they don't vote against him in future.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bridget Nandor. I hope I'm saying her surname right, Nyandoro.
Yeah.
What exactly does she say the issue is then? And what are important points in this case?
So, Bridget Nandoro raises a number of different points. We're going to have to split them between what appear to be personal issues and what appear to be issues of, I can't really call it governance and government, but issues of political principle. So her first issue in combining all of the posts is that she says the MPs that leaked that, or that gave Wopol information that she was part of the opposition MPs that are getting land, they did that to demonize her, yet they equally have got relations with ZANU PF. So you understand, when you're in opposition, right, there is this unspoken agreement of trust and faith that says you're in opposition to ZANU PF. So when you're in opposition but getting gifts from ZANU PF, it's really seen as like the kiss of death. You know, it really looks like you've gotten in bed, you know, with ZANU PF. Or in this case, these gifts are coming from the government, right? But ZANU PF kind of is like the government, so you know, you kind of start chasing your tail a little bit. But when you're in opposition, you're not expected to be moving, you know, hand in glove with the government, with ZANU PF. So when you're accused of that in the opposition, it's a big thing. And she then says, the people accusing me of doing this, they also do the same thing, they do worse. I am receiving land I am entitled to as an MP, because as an MP, you know, they get cars, they get $40,000 US. Well, they got 40,000 the last time, they might get more this time, but they get these perks as members of parliament. I'm entitled to that. It's not a bribe like you're saying, but the people alleging that I'm now in bed with ZANU PF, they are also in bed with ZANU PF. And then she then takes it a step further by then alleging that Joanna Mambe is in a relationship with a named person who is in ZANU PF, or rather the grandchild or the son of an unnamed person. She brings up Beitbridge. The country's vice president is from Beitbridge, so people immediately start saying, oh, so she's dating Kembo Moadi's son or Kembo Moadi's grandchild. And she alleges that there's been a violent spat, or Joanna got arrested and so forth. None of it is substantiated, and there's no evidence of any of that. But that's what she says is her issue, that you are getting us maligned by the public to say, you know, takatengesa, or I don't know how you would understand it in Tswana, but basically that you've betrayed the struggle. And she's saying, you're saying I've betrayed the struggle, but I have not betrayed the struggle. I didn't do that. You people who are saying this, you've done worse. And then along the way, there's also a couple of other personal issues, because then we find out that the reason she is an MP is because she has a child with Nelson Chamisa's biological brother. Right. And she then mentions that she's got problems with Nelson Chamisa's brother, and that they've had a 9-year relationship. In that 9-year relationship, she then says Nelson Chamisa's brother raped me. She also says Nelson Chamisa's brother abused me, and then Nelson Chamisa's brother is not taking care of the child. And Nelson Chamisa has done nothing about it, and also Joanna Mambe has done nothing about it. This is what she's putting across as her issues. So like I said, we separate them because, you know, naturally this is the gap. We don't really want to get into people's pants unless it's a matter of, you know, public violence or public crime or public health. But this is what she says. So there's the issue of, you guys are calling me a betrayer, but at the same time, you guys do worse. And then there's her personal issues with the Chamisa family. And then those revelations about how then she became an MP. So those are like sort of her issues, yeah.
Cool. Okay, and what about Joanna Mambe, who she seemed to have taken a huge aim at? What does she say? What does she initially say about this?
So, Joanna at first doesn't want to respond. And because at the time, incidentally, when this land is supposed to be given to MPs, Joanna is actually waging a fight against the government trying to do that, because the land is in her constituency, and some of that land is not marked as being residential land, right? Harare is already struggling with a lot of water problems because you've had stands that have been built on wetlands. It's affected the entire ecosystem. So Joanna doesn't want this happening in her constituency. So at first she says, I'm not going to respond to this because I've really got important work to do within the constituency. And I mean, like I said, I'll give her that. I'm from her constituency, not an opposition fan myself, but I see the work that she does. She's generally available. So she says, hey, look, I'm not going to respond to this. I'm really, really busy. These guys are going to use our prime land, you know, they're going to convert it for residential purposes. That shouldn't be the case. So that's her first response. But then Bridget goes on and on. Right? And when Bridget goes on and on, the allegations, they get more damning, because then, like I said, then she introduced the case that I was abused, he did nothing about it. And then she then claims that Denford Ngadziore is a polygamist and he is building houses, expensive houses for his wives. This is a person who got kicked out of university because he had faked O-level qualifications, so doesn't have O-level qualifications, doesn't have a traceable business. You know, he was walking in torn shoes not long ago, just before he became a counselor. So she cries, red flag, where'd you get the money from? You're stealing. And you all of a sudden, you've not got this big family. Big family, not an issue, but how are you affording this? You don't have the money and you're building houses, double stories. So she then introduces, albeit like in between the undertones, she then introduced the possibility of theft of public funds, the possibility of council resources being diverted to fund Denford Ngadziware's supposed, polygamous marriage. And then she alleges that Joanna Mambe was sleeping with Nelson Chamisa inside of a car boot, or somebody was being smuggled in a car boot for sex. I know, don't laugh. This is pretty much what gets said. So there's a lot that gets said. So we now move from Joanna is dating Mohadi's son to Joanna is dating Chamisa, or Joanna slept with Chamisa in the office. So it gets very personal. So then Joanna responds, and I think I shared the response, quite a dignified one. She says, hey, look, I've been a sister to you, right? You wanted to unalive yourself. I drove all night to help you. I've been there for you as a sister. Your relationship with Chamisa's brother, that's your territory. I mean, I wasn't there. I wasn't there when you dated this guy. I wasn't there when you guys fell out as partners. And then she then says, look, because Bridget is one of the MPs that are supposedly on Chabangu's side. And she brings this up and says, you now have such a problem with Nelson Chamisa. But when you ran as an MP, you ran under Chamisa's banner. You even thanked Chamisa after you won your seat as an MP. And then along the way, you switched over to Chabangu's side. I didn't switch over to Chabangu's side with you. Now you're attacking me. Mm-hmm. And ever since you went to Chabangu's side, you are now attacking me. Can you own your political choice, right? You chose Chabangu. That's fair and fine. Do your Chabangu stuff, don't drag me into it. I've seen you as a sister. I've always tried to help you. And I think that's about the last that Joanna responds. Afterwards, she just goes about her life, starts doing with school, because I think Joanna is at Oxford or something at the moment. And she just continues with her work in the constituency and, and other things. And I have to put as a footnote, when this happened, obviously, we then tried to reach out to Bridget to say, hey, we've heard the voice notes you've shared, we've heard what you've said. There are some elements that are concerning. Can we talk to you about this? Can we get a right of reply? She then says, these matters are very sensitive. I need to take time to myself before I can respond to you. And then naturally, when somebody says they are dealing with something that's potentially sensitive, affects their mental health, the ethical things for us to put the brakes. So we put the brakes and she never gets back to us, just in case people wonder. In terms of Joanna, she, having said, I'm not going to respond, I've really got important work to do, which we understood. She then does the other response, which we then share.
Pretty interesting. What else does she add? And what does Bridget then also say?
I think she doesn't add much after that. There's a number of voice notes in a certain WhatsApp group. And then there's a number of responses even in the comment section on Joanna. But the rest of it is just, you slept with this person in Zanu PF, you slept with that person in Zanu PF, or you sleep or intend to sleep with that other person in Zanu PF. And then for Denford, it's you are funding your lifestyle using stolen funds from council. And it just goes on along that path. And then Joanna just shuts it down. She responds once and for all, and ends it, like I said, ends it with the usual. You chose Chabangu, you ditched Chamisa, you betrayed him, own your political choice. As for the personal things, she says to her, look, if you are alleging that in the course of that relationship you were sexually assaulted, please go and report it to the police station, because that is a serious matter that requires the police. I can't offer you solidarity. What you need is legal help, right? This has to be a criminal matter, and take it to the police. And not much is said about it afterwards.
Okay. What can we make out of this squabble? What are the key things with regards to the opposition?
What are the key things? Not much. I mean, the opposition always has a lot of internal squabbles, whether it's Makombore Raduzishe exchanging some subliminals with Obey Stole, or it's Fadzai Maere and Ostalos, or Ostalos and somebody else. We've gotten used post 2023 to a lot of fighting within the MDC, within the CCC. But that culture extends to even prior, before it became the CCC, when it was the MDC Alliance. So gradually, since Tsvangirai died, the main opposition has just been shedding members, splitting into various splinter groups, and then those splinter groups also split. So Monzora splits, and then he keeps the MDC, but that fed the splits. And then Chamisa keeps Washman Ngube, BT, and them, but eventually again there's issues there. So it's just a carry on of the culture of falling out that we've been seeing within the opposition. But as to what we can make out of it, I would say not a lot, except that obviously opposition MPs are, they're taking the knife to each other's throats. So what does it mean for the opposition? I would say I don't know if we can necessarily say we have an opposition, because I don't know if Joanna Mambe can be as scathing without Chabangu then kicking out of parliament, because whatever MPs are left are serving, at the mercy of Chabangu. If he wants to recall them, he will do exactly that whenever he wants to. He's already done it to people like Amos Chibaya, who was, very, very vocal. So that's sort of where we are. You have a bunch of Chamisa loyalists whose hands are tied, because Chabangu would recall them from parliament at any time. You've got those that jump to Chabangu's side because, having spent money to campaign, they now need to enjoy the benefits of being an MP for the 5 years before it becomes a loss.
Right. Where does Mnangagwa fit in all of this? So Mnangagwa is the chief architect of all of this. And I say this because, if you recall, when we spoke about Isaac Moyo, we spoke about the CIO's, basically it's ethos, which is the CIO exists to break the law for presidential interests, unlike maybe the CIA that advances national security. So Chabangu infiltrating the CCC is a CIO project, and we've said that, and they've done it successfully well. So, and they've done it to the benefit of obviously Mnangagwa, which is fair and fine in politics. You don't just fight to win; you also fight to eliminate your opponent. That's what political leaders do all across the world. It's a dirty game. So that's where he fits in that. He's the architect of this. And maybe if you say, well, but he's not the direct architect, it's other players, he's certainly the beneficiary, because the absence of an opposition means at the moment Zimbabwe is almost a one-party state, because there's no functional. Chabangu and them are not the opposition. They're pros, and they go to the president's farm. That's the equivalent of you hearing that Helen Zille is going to Cyril's farm every single weekend, or Helen Zille is entertaining debates about Ramaphosa amending the constitution for a third term. So substitute Helen Zille for Chabangu, you kind of get you get the gist of it. Right, then let's talk about the three big points here, right? Impeachment, amendments of the constitution, and 2030.
Okay.
What is the deal with this? Because Mnangagwa already said he doesn't want term extension. So what all this bribery talk about? Is it even true? Can it be it?
So impeachment, I can sort of understand. Impeachment comes in because Geza says he's going to get Mnangagwa impeached, right? On the face of it, we've seen no evidence that is the case, because there's not even an impeachment motion tabled before Parliament as we speak. There was none tabled before Parliament even took a recess. So it's something we've read online, Word documents that are printed and typed, not stamped. We don't know the genesis of them. It's something we are reading online. And as we've learned, there's a lot of emotive creations that got on the internet that are not really founded in truth. So impeachment aside for now, because it's not even before Parliament as we speak. The second one was amendment of the Constitution. That is something that is certainly possible. ZANU PF has the majority to do so, and when you then add their Chabangu sidekicks, then they've got more than another majority to add to that as well. So that is again, a possibility. And then I know you said, Mnangagwa has said maybe 5 or 6 times that I don't want to be president beyond 2028. That's fair and fine. That's what he's said. But the challenge is all the chess pieces on the ground that are being moved are pointing in that direction. Chabangu takes over the CCC, ensuring that there can be no resistance to Mnangagwa changing the constitution or surviving an impeachment vote, whatever that comes out of all of that. Chabangu is not the biggest beneficiary in that. It's Emerson Mnangagwa and Zanu PF. The death of opposition in Zimbabwe benefits Emerson Mnangagwa. You look at all of the other things that are aligning, right? And this including senior figures in Zanu PF who are openly saying we want Mnangagwa to rule beyond 2028. And effectively saying we want to violate the constitution. That is exactly what we're going to do. And we're going to violate it and we're going to fix it by amending it, you know. So it's that old age debate of constitutionalism versus constitutionality. So there's no denying that there is an appetite to do an illegal act and then find ways of amending the constitution to fix it. Think of how, for instance, the coup happened in 2017, but after the coup, there was then a High Court judgment to say the coup was legal. So it's normal in Zimbabwe that something untoward will happen and then the law will be bended in future to accommodate that, right? So there's precedent for that happening. So Mnangagwa says he doesn't want to be president beyond 2028, but everything is pointing towards that. Now, you will know the old age adage that in politics, lying is not part of the game. Lying is the game. So we can't take what he says at face value because that is the game in politics. So maybe he doesn't want to stay. Maybe he will resist until he retires and goes back to his farm. But every other thing that's happened in the last 8, 12, 18 months seems to point towards 2030 is going to go unchallenged. And in the absence of opposition, the only person challenging 2030 then is Geza, who, you know, like Obey said, sometimes can appear inadequate, but he's just about the only option at the moment because there's nobody else doing it. There's no opposition. So that's pretty much the big three for you there.
Right. I also want to know then, you say MPs get houses and packs and other packs all the time.
Yeah.
Do they then have bases to fight for defenseless Zimbabweans?
That one is tough. It's tough because MPs can't staff. And, you know, I'm not necessarily against MPs, you know, not being adequately rewarded or being unable to do their work. But what we've seen with MPs across the divide is an appetite and a culture of self-enrichment, even if it comes in very immoral ways, right? So for instance, when the national purse is dry, MPs will kick up a fuss about wanting a second vehicle or a third vehicle as part of their perks. I think the last time they were given $40,000 each, people were pissed off when that happened. Like, people were extremely upset when it happened. And I think only a couple, off the top of my head, I think Rusty Makram rejected that money. But you'd have thought that out of principle, they would reject it. Like, I can comfortably tell you now that with the way things are going in South Africa, you know, things are bad, the economy is going down. Nowhere close to Zimbabwe, by the way, but things are not okay. If Cyril Ramaphosa woke up and said, I'm going to give every parliamentarian 3 million rand, you would not find a single DA member that would accept that money. And if they did, they'll be kicked out of the party. Opposition MPs they've taken that money, no questions asked. In fact, when it comes to anything that will benefit the MPs themselves, self-enrichment, ZANU PF MPs, opposition MPs, be it CCC, whatever, that is the one thing they will vote you almost unanimously for, right? So that's then when you start introducing the question of just how much is enough, because we're seeing a culture of self-enrichment.
Before I let you go, Maynard.
Yeah.
In your view, that spat, is it a seismic event that changed the face of opposition politics?
Seismic, if you like gossip and drama, yes. It's, you know, it's the usual, oh my God, those are massive allegations. But in terms of changing the face of opposition, no. And I say no because at the minute, there isn't much, you know. Nelson Chamisa, for one reason or the other, knows, only he knows what he is up to. He is, you know, all about his Bible. He's not getting involved. But when you look at the behavior of the MPs that were elected under his banner, right? you can sort of understand maybe why he wants to run solo, because these guys have got a bastardized moral compass. It is so bad. So maybe Chamisa is right in that, hey, look, even if I wanted to build a team and look at the kind of characters around me, and these characters came after Chamisa went to great lengths to try and, be in control of the candidate selection process so that it wasn't just open and democratic. He said he wanted to root out people, with other agendas and so forth. That's ended up with, people throwing allegations like the kind that you're getting from Bridget Nandor. That process created your chabangos, for instance. So you look at it and think, okay, so maybe Chamisa's got a good reason to not be involved because there's no one who's trustworthy, around him. So whether this can change the face of opposition, I doubt. Another thing, Boipelo, is that the opposition is such a personality-driven thing that even your most popular opposition figures, if Joanna Mambe stood away from Chamisa, regardless of the good work she's doing in Harare West, she would lose that constituency. So Chamisa is the only game in town when it comes to opposition, right? I think even everybody accepts that if Geza had been able to invite Chamisa into his protest or his stay away, the landscape of that movement would be something different. Chamisa can put 100,000 people in the streets tomorrow. That's the kind of power that he has, but it's built around him as a person. So can opposition change fundamentally because an MP who supports Chamisa and an MP who has beef with Chamisa's brother, and by extension Chamisa himself, had a falling out and they started getting into each other's panties? That shouldn't change the opposition as much. At least that's my view. But where it might be seismic is that the ruling party essentially continues to operate as a one-party state, and that's not healthy for the democracy itself. In the past, we've known that ZANU PF has always performed better when there are checks and balances. So you think of the period of the GNU when, the MDC made a significant, they were a significant chunk in government. They could, they could rein them in. Mm-hmm. So it's seismic, in ZANU PF, they'll be rubbing their hands because, make no mistake, ZANU PF is at its weakest right now. And I say this because in the last couple of elections, ZANU PF has won comfortably, but Emmerson Mnangagwa has always been outperformed by his party. So there's a lot of people in ZANU PF that don't believe in Mnangagwa's leadership and choose to vote for Chamisa. A stronger opposition leader, or like maybe you'd say, think Changira in 2008, would have no problems beating Mnangagwa left, right, and center. We don't kind of have that at the moment. So ZANU PF is at its weakest. Lots of infighting, things we never used to see during Mugabe's days, things that sometimes make you look and think, is this how comrades behave towards each other? Think of Chris Mchango, the spokesperson, releasing a statement on official party head attacking the Minister of Information. That used to be, that's extreme indiscipline because he's attacking an appointee who's being deployed to government, and him having no respect for him. When people say to him, when people that we know were close to him were saying to him, "Hey, why did you attack him?" So he outright said, "I want to drive out Junior." So those kind of things will not happen under Mugabe's ZANU PF. So ZANU PF is probably at its weakest. It's going to renew. I'm sort of jumping the gun, but I think one of our analysis episodes is going to look at the various factions we're now seeing in ZANU PF, because you've got Mnangagwa, his children, and his children's friends. Then you've got people who are sympathetic to Chiwenga. And then nobody's talking about the other ZANU PF guys, the old guard, your Chinamasas, your Obetum Pofus, the guys who were in the Central Committee during Mugabe's time and also during Mnangagwa's time, who are no longer ministers, by the way, who've been relegated to do party business. And they are regrouping and recollecting into a formidable force of their own. They don't really identify with Chiwenga because he's a military guy, not a politician. So, and then there's the business, cabal, which is the group of business people who are showing an interest, in joining politics because that's the only way to control your destiny. So you've got these business people, then you've got you know, those old ZANU PF guys, then you've got Mnangagwa and his kids, then you've got Chiwenga and the army. And ZANU PF is set for some rebirth of sorts through that process. But I don't want to go deep into that too much because that's one of our next Sunday reviews. But yeah.
I was about to ask that. What are we reviewing next?
That.
Yeah.
That ZANU PF's incredible. You know, it's pivotal moment. They are approaching their crossroads.
Thank you very much, Maynard, for your analysis. Appreciate.
Thank you. That was a Sunday review, guys, and see you soon.
Thanks, everyone, and bye.
They didn't hear you, but you said thanks. Bye.